This land holds some of the planet's most breathtaking terrains. From coastal waters to towering peaks, across deserts and rolling plains, countless distinct nations once thrived here. This was their homeland. But everything changed when foreign ships reached these shores. In spring 1803, two US politicians in Paris sealed a major land deal. With a simple signature, their country's size doubled for $15 million. This Louisiana purchase didn't actually involve buying land from France. Didn't own it. What the US acquired was colonial control over vast lands. Essentially, France agreed to step aside so the US could expand unchecked. But if America truly wanted control, they'd have to deal with the indigenous people already living there, people whose roots stretched back thousands of years, long before Europeans thought to sail west. And it's not just modern hindsight calling this theft. US leaders at the time knew the land wasn't theirs. They wanted to approach native affairs differently from Europe's empires. George Washington himself stated US dealings should reflect justice and humanity. So, the idea was to avoid war-use formal treaties and pay fairly for land. America's founding principles, justice, peace, liberty demanded it. Our series, How the US Stole, begins Higher America's origin theft. As settlers arrived and the US expanded, they made treaties with native tribes, offering food, money, tools, and services in exchange for land. But unsurprisingly, many tribes didn't want to leave their ancestral homes just for handouts. That's when Washington's ideals began to fade. America was growing fast. Its citizens demanded land. As tribes refused, the government turned aggressive. The expansion surged west like a green wave. Some tribes near the Great Lakes refused to sell. They set a river as the boundary. The US ignored it and waged war, losing twice, but winning the third time. That led to a treaty surrendering all of Ohio. The Seminoles resisted removal, prompting war and forcing them inland, far from vital farmland and coasts. In Alabama, the Muskogee agreed to sell part of their land for a guarantee they could keep the rest. The US agreed, then broke the deal. Settlers invaded, and the military pushed the Muskogee out. These betrayals were systematic. Leaders were tricked, manipulated, or falsely appointed. Some were plied with alcohol before signing away tribal lands. In another case, the Sioux and Arapaho beat the US military repeatedly. The US finally signed a peace treaty till gold was discovered. Then they broke it, redrew maps, and built roads. Greed overpowered promises. Eventually, tribes realized resisting meant death. They accepted payments and left. Over 100 years, the US signed 368 treaties, almost all broken to displace indigenous peoples and make way for settlers. The documents may appear just, but they masked conquest. Even so, one region resisted, the Deep South. Here 5 large nations coexisted with settlers and had formal treaties ensuring their land rights. Many spoke English, wore European clothes, farmed, and even owned slaves. These 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, and Seminole, could have coexisted with Americans. But then cotton changed everything. Cotton farming made southern elites wealthy, especially using enslaved Africans. The prized Black Belt lands were held by native tribeslands, formalized by treaties. White Southerners, especially in Georgia, defied those agreements. Georgia passed laws to dissolve Cherokee government, aiming to replace red residents with white ones. The Cherokee resisted legally. They sued Georgia, and the case reached the US Supreme Court. The court ruled in favor of the Cherokee, affirming their land rights. But that ruling only mattered if enforced, and President Andrew Jackson had no intention of doing that. Jackson, who once bragged about slaughtering Native Americans, ignored the court's decision. Instead, he championed a new law, the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The law used taxpayer money to relocate native tribes to unfamiliar Western lands. It promised peaceful negotiations and permanent security. But Jackson ignored that too. It was all more posturing, legalized ethnic cleansing dressed as diplomacy. So began forced removals. The US military, private contractors, and local governments pushed tribes off their land. The 5 civilized tribes were the main targets. More bribes, more sham treaties, and when that failed, eventually, the Cherokee signed a treaty selling their remaining land, but the signer wasn't their legitimate leader. Still, the US took the deal. Between 1831 and 1838, over 100,000 native people were uprooted. Most walked over 1,000 miles under horrific conditions to distant lands they'd never seen. The Cherokee called it the trail where we cried, the trail of tears. Some resisted, others were forced at gunpoint. Meanwhile, cotton farmers moved in with enslaved labor. We'll never know the full death toll, maybe 3,000, maybe 15,000, but the impact is clear. This was systematic, documented, and state-sponsored. We have the paperwork, treaties, budgets, spreadsheets. The US tried to mask conquest with law and signatures. Ironically, in trying to act unlike old empires, America created its own empire. Hitler later cited this campaign as inspiration. He said Europe, not America, would be the true land of opportunity, and compared the Volga River to the USS Mississippi. This isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. Part 2 will explore what happened after these tribes arrived in their designated Indian territory. It follows their continued struggle to rebuild and to reclaim their place in history.